Hello, hello, Rhoda here. Welcome to my craft room. Today we're doing the Craftly Haul flip through with story. So I don't know, but it may be 2 videos, it may be 3. It just depends on how far we get and how much talking we do. I'm filming this on Friday the 13th. How apt. Mom will be like doing little crosses everywhere she goes to kind of, you know, negate the 13. You know how she loves that. I've got my own little paper of the Craftly Haul here, and I kind of know what page goes with what area, so I'll be reading from that. But let's look at the journal cover first. I know I've shown it to you before. Let me zoom out just a little bit. But yeah, I really like how it turned out. I love the finish on it, especially. It's not too shiny, but it does look like faux leather. I did the band here, I guess you would call it, on the front and the back, and that's what holds my piece of closure in. And it's sort of a play off of the butterfly closure that I've done in the past. And I have um, several videos on it. I think I may have called it a tunnel closure because at the one point I had a butterfly out here, but that wasn't always the case. So butterfly kind of threw you for a loop. So I kind of took that out of the title. I've got the 4 corners on here, which I probably could make 8 if I really wanted to. And I have thought about it because I do have them. I haven't done anything with the back yet, so I'm still debating on whether I want to do like a faux book uh, binding cover, whatever you would call that part, spine. All right, so we have our Craftly Haul CPI, which what does that mean? Something investigation maybe? 374. So what happens is I got in here and I made my own notebook, I guess you would call it, of the case file. I wasn't so happy that I did it on white, but I didn't know what else to use, and I only did it one-sided. I could get in here and do a little spray. I don't know how that would affect it. Or I could do a little scuffing, at least on the front page. This was some of that faux football fabric paper that I got at Hobby Lobby in the container. You would get one that's got like, it's a mystery pack, basically. And it's like 10 of their papers, and they give it to you for like, I think, $5. And so I did a front and a back there. I went ahead and, how did I do that? I pulled a piece over to put on the papers, and then I put brads through, and then on the back side I had a scrap piece of the football fabric to hide the legs of the brad. So, and then I rounded the corners, and then I did these little gusseted V pockets. Now I could have made, I was trying to think of the way that I could make my gusseted pockets turn out. It was a 12 by 12 piece of paper, and I thought I had to cut each corner off. Uh, yeah. Anyway, I made it work. Let's just say I made it work. All right. This is our first page. The only thing is, when you get to the first, second, and third page, it's kind of like they're mixed up. So I'll just read it as is here, and then we'll flip as we see fit. All right. CPI Case 374, Craftly Hall. Attending investigators Ernest Brundle, Carl Edwards, Dorothy Blakely invite you to this reading and are appreciative of your attendance and your comments and your observations. All right. It was in the early spring of 1863 that work began on the construction of what was to become Craftly Hall. Situated on open land in a quiet, sleepy corner of the countryside of Lower Craftly, the workmen faithfully followed the detailed plans of Arthur Millsand, the successful London doctor who was now seeking a quiet, comfortable locale in which to enjoy his retirement. When the work was completed the following May, Dr. Milsond and his wife Violet immediately moved into the house, and being something of a history buff, she soon took it upon herself to begin researching the area's past. Now that's where this starts. You won't see the Milsons until like the third page, but this is the history that she found on Craftley Hall. She was surprised to discover amongst the sparse records at the village library that their new home had once been the site of a settlement decimated by plague in 1665. Now that's where this comes in. We have the hooded beaked doctor, the plague doctor. Then we have one of the victims. We have some crows, always crows. We have the lower craftly little village down here in the frame, and it's just got a repeat here about the settlement and the plague. In the early 1700s, a church was then built on the plot. Well, let me go ahead and finish this. I think that's on the next page. Whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I made this to where I have these little deep pockets or side pockets and such. So here's the plague victim lady. It was kind of a plain piece of paper with some trees in the background. So, you know, you had to do something to it. I did a little shadowing under her feet. And then it has this on the back, which is easily writable. And then that just tucks right back in there. And then I've got my numbers on each page, so we know which day is what. This one went down a little bit. Okay. So this one, in the early 1700s, a church was then built on the plot, with its own small cemetery, yada yada, and I lost my spot. With its own small cemetery that still remained in the grounds, although sadly the church had mysteriously collapsed and the reverend of the time apparently disappeared, feared deceased. There was a brief mention of a convict who had evidently escaped from a prison a few miles away, who was reported to have lost a finger on his right hand and was loosely linked to the incidents, but no other mention of him was made. Dr. Milsond assured his wife that the land's past would have no bearing on their happy lives together, and for a time they settled into a quiet and comfortable existence. So here you can see my my cemetery. There was quite a few cemetery photos in this bunch of things. Here's the convict. You see him in his striped gear. And then there's his hand, which he lost his pointer finger, I guess that would be. And so here's the piece that comes out. Behind it, I put this crow on a gravestone, and you can see a few graves behind. And then here is like a ghost of the Reverend of that time, of the 1700s. He will come into play much later on in actually at the end. So remember the Reverend. Remember. So that just kind of tucks right down in there. I think I made my pocket too deep. Over here you can see a beautiful little framed, I guess you would call it a cherub. I have a bat in here because, you know, bats always are around old buildings. So I've got a stamp of some bats coming out of the old church here. And that was the one that used to stand here, but no longer is there, got burned down. And then here's a little ghost girl behind the gate that you would go into the church. There's actually a tombstone right here. I've got a stamp that says things are not what they seem. Ooh. I did a little stenciling back here. And, all right, our next page. Here is the doctor and his wife Violet. Dr. and Mrs. Milsond. All right. That was until the spring of 1865 when, as he was preparing one of the outbuildings for restoration, the freshly retired doctor was struck by a falling wooden beam and killed instantly. Well, I'm ahead of myself, aren't I? So here is the building. It was like, they built it, but in some cases you could still see some. This is probably the attic rooms, I would think. There's another room with a ghost, and there was a bonus piece that she gave us, and it said the house was quiet, but was never for long. It never was for long. I have a hand over here on the window, an old clock. I have a top hat with a mask, which I thought could have belonged to these two. Um, and then here's the beautiful house, Craftley Hall, that they built. Beautiful, beautiful home. I just love it. I love the gates, all of that. So I have a return and forwarded postage guaranteed on here because they moved in. So I kind of put that there. We have the Craftley Hall map right there. And this is Lower Craftley. And I'm not, I guess that's the hall. I'm not sure. I think that may be the church. It's kind of like you got to look at it and try to figure out. I don't see the cemetery, though, unless that's like fenced in behind. I don't know. I'm guessing. Maybe that's the little village itself. That could be it. And then this piece was on here, and I thought, well, that looks like where she did the record researching. It's got even a little crow on a coin there, and these are like all the records that she went through to research for the hall. And then I made a side tuck here. And like I said, I was supposed to be getting in here and writing on all of these little file folders and such about about what the investigators found. And I never did it. I haven't got there yet. So here we go. This is where the doctor gets killed in 1865. And he was hit by a falling beam. So here's the beam. It's a little bit of blood on it. I found this guy, and I decided to whatever, make it look like that's where the beam hit him. I've got the angel over here and remember me because Violet cast into a deep and traumatized despair, refused to stay at the house any longer, and so the very next day, she went to stay with her sister, sent for her belongings, and never returned to the area. So I've got the building, the outbuilding that he was killed in. You can see the roof is sort of falling in. I put condemned here. And he wanted to make a man cave. I guess you'd call it a man cave for himself out here in this outbuilding. And this is inside looking out. And you can see kind of how rough and tumble it is. There's weeds all around the outside. And then we have this that pulls out. And it is like, it's a kind of a 2-story in there. You have a small attic area. Well, like I was saying, he wanted to make a man cave, but he also had all these little creepy things over time that he collected as a doctor in jars and, formaldehyde and stuff like that. And Violet was creeped out by it. So she wanted him out of the house. So that's what he was doing out here. So she felt guilty at all of this. So that's a good bit of the reason she just kind of left. She felt so guilty about causing him to go out and fix up this outbuilding. And this is, like I said, the little, what do we call these? I always wanted one of these in my house. But anyhow, this window reminded me of this window so much. And I said, I've got to use that. And you can kind of see where a couple of the panes are missing, or the little boards of the pane. And that's where I put his head. And he was looking out and watching, because the spirit is still here at this outbuilding. And he was watching her leave, and he's saying, remember me. Here was his lone grave in the cemetery, kind of set to the side. All right, so let's move on. Craftley Hall then slumbered beneath a heavy silence, untouched for 55 years, until Rose and Jeffrey Binder took up residence at the beginning of May 1920, having been keen to find what they had called a fixer-upper. So here we go. Here is Rose and Jeffrey Binder, a young couple, very nice looking. Here is another map, which is of actually Craftley Hall. We have the hall up here. This was like an area for, I guess, go around in a circle, kind of a park. You had the cemetery and the old church down here with the gate to go in. And then you had just like little pieces and parts of a park or whatever to walk around. You know, how the ladies would stroll around and do things. This is their Model T Ford that they drove in. Jeffrey was very well endowed with money. Maybe I'll say it like that. All right, so I stamped this Home Sweet Home on here, and you can see the hall. And I have this background on it. And you can see them dating. And I think you'll hear more about how they met in the next part of this paragraph. So we have that, and then we have this. And this is the title deed for Craftley Hall, Lower Craftley. And you can see their initials here, Mr. J and Mrs. R. Binder. And it was in May of 1920, 1st of May. And on the back is his diary. And it mentions his diary later on. So, yes, they wanted a fixer-upper. Impressed by the large and pretty grounds, which we just saw, the potential of the outbuildings, and the calm quaintness of the small cemetery that stood nearby, the couple decided to wait until later in the year before undertaking the considerable renovations that were required, particularly in one part of the house, preferring to concentrate instead on settling into the handful of downstairs rooms that were more habitable. Jeffrey had garnered a not inconsiderable wealth from the inheritance of the agricultural hardware manufacturing factory his father had established, and had met his attractive wife there, while he continued working at the business throughout the summer, which had now grown to include the production of domestic clips and fastenings for paper and garments. Rose remained at the house, arranging their possessions and preparing for the changes to come. She had become unwell while employed at the factory, overcome by the effects of the phosphorus and the sulfur that filled the air, suffering from sore eyes and developing a raw and prolonged cough. Her younger cousin Alice had similarly succumbed to a comparable affliction, and so was brought into the house as the autumn arrived to assist with cleaning and with the general upkeep of the property and its gardens. Now, this is where I should have been turning at the time, but I didn't. So here is the part that is getting renovated, and it's like the servants' quarters. That's why I have domestic servant down here. I have some spider webs, some bugs, some skulls. And so, yeah, that was this whole area here. And it had a file folder with it. And there was some old, and look how creepy these are. The faces are smudged off of them almost. And this was one of the workers that came to look at the outbuildings and things to see what he needed to do with them. And then over here, this is where Rose is staying at the house and preparing everything. And this is the end of my first signature. And I loved all this old furniture. It just was gorgeous. I loved building these rooms. And this is, everybody was doing a kaleidoscope kind of a thing where you fell back into the room. Well, I made this the background so it looks like you were walking back toward this door. And then I had this circle table here, and then you could write on the back of it. I wasn't as happy the way this turned out. I had wanted it to look like there was like a room that the wall ended right here, but you couldn't see it because I put the chair in the way. And then this little room ended right there, this little doorway. So it didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to. So this is where her cousin Alice is coming. This is Alice arriving. This was the gate she came through. This is where Rose had written to Alice to invite her to the hall. And this is Alice writing back. Dearest Rose, thank you so much for the offer of a room in your new residence. I will pack and be there by and by. Your cousin Alice. And then this was a picture of Alice. She arrived in the fall, so I had a fall leaf. This was a younger photo of Alice. And this was even younger. So it was just a few little things to let you see how Alice was settling in. She's got her bed. She has a photo on the wall and her wardrobe with all of her beautiful dresses in there. And let's turn the page. So it was Alice who first noticed something irregular in and about the house. One bright morning at the beginning of September, she had been down to the cold, damp cellar in search of the source of scratching sounds she'd heard and found an old empty birdcage, which she considered strangely unsettling. Then returning to the kitchen, she saw someone she thought was dressed as a church reverend, casually wandering beside the small cemetery. All right, so here is Alice going to the basement, and I put this window with some acetate, a broken pane of acetate, in here. And so this is where she's hearing the scratching. Well, I thought it could be this bat had gotten into the basement window, and she heard him fluttering down in here. And there's the steps to come downstairs. And then this was like a flame, maybe what she used to come down into this dark, dark place. It's creepy. It was creepy. So here we go. That's the bird cage she found unsettling, and then there was a big old raven on top of it. So a couple of things had actually broken into the basement to make all of that noise. Over here you can see the ghost of the Reverend walking in the cemetery. Here's like an early scene, and there's one of the angels overlooking the cemetery. And here was another little piece like that used to be at the church that burned down, and some more of the cemetery and figures. All right, so then she found that strangely unsettling. Okay. Then, returning to the kitchen, she saw someone... I did that. Sorry. Shuddering at the idea of there being rats in the cellar and wondering from where the Reverend had come, she continued with her work and consequently forgot about them both. A few days later, she again thought she had seen someone, this time a young boy, peering in through the glass of the front door. However, when she went to investigate, she found no one there, although she was puzzled to discover a small stack of clean, shining pebbles left outside the door, carefully arranged from smallest to largest. And this was the only set of stones in any of the pictures, so that's what I used there. And then here we go with the little boy that's looking in the door. And then this is like going up to the front door. So then, I think I made this a short pocket. And I have a little teacup here. I don't know why. I just liked it. All right. Alice was keen to remain at the house with Rose and Jeffrey. Delighted to have been asked to join them, she decided it was best she mentioned nothing of her sightings, nor of the way in which she had started finding certain objects, such as ornaments, cups, and other small items moved from one place to another It was probably Rose who had moved them, she decided, despite thinking it somewhat odd. That's why I had a cup there. The east wing of the building needed the greatest refurbishment. Its rooms, once the quarters of maids and servants who had been employed, albeit briefly, by Dr. Milsond, although she could imagine no reason why these rooms and corridors should have fallen into such disrepair when compared with the rest of the house, Rose had determined to begin tidying and sweeping them through so she and Geoffrey could begin their repairs and redecoration. Having completed her work in one of the rooms, she called for Alice to come and collect the sweepings into a dustpan for her, since the dust had irritated her cough and she needed to withdraw to the kitchen for a drink of water. As Alice began busying herself with her work, she felt that, at her periphery, just for a moment, she had seen a figure in the corner of the room. The dark, almost translucent shape of a person, which vanished before she could fully turn her head towards it. Again she said nothing of it, despite now beginning to feel uneasy about the place. But when Rose called to ask if she, too, would like some water, the incident slipped from her mind. So my idea of this, these twins especially, they were part of the servants. They were the servants' children, and they also haunt the place. But the investigator comes, he actually researches twins of the area because there was so many twins born in this one area that was very, very uncommon. Now, this is the ghost that she sees out of the corner of her eye in the corner of the room, and you can write on the back of that. And I made the frame here into a pocket. Now, this was the mother to these little twins here. I have a file folder here about an identification check. So he is wanting to make sure the stories that go along with these twins here are the ones that he's researching in his folder at the back of this journal. And he's observing, it's number 13, of course. Here's the figure in the corner of the room again. And then here is a picture of the parents. This is the mother, the one you're seeing here and here. And this is their sitting room. She was an upper maid, and he was a really high up, like the butler kind of person. So they were high-end servants. So they had a very, very nice living room, sitting room. And you can see the picture of their twin daughters right there in their room. So that's what he's trying to find out, if this is the same family that he is suspecting. All right, so we're going to go over here to this page. And on the next afternoon, as she once again returned to the derelict wing of the house, broom in hand, she stopped at the doorway of the same room and stared at the bare wooden floor. There, in the center of the room, stood a pile of perhaps 7 dinner plates, the top one covered in moldy food, while scattered around the room were various items of misshapen cutlery. As she looked, wondering how they could possibly have been there, she again became aware of something else, a sensation that she was not alone, and, turning to leave, for an instant she once more saw a shadowy figure at the far end of the corridor, moving quickly away from her. This time she thought it could have been the form of a woman in a long dark dress, but again she thought it best not to trouble her cousin with it, despite how anxious it had made her. All right, so here is the dinner plates that were found by Alice as she was going around. And as you can see here, they were kind of just scattered in the floor. And Jody Lewis, on her coming up at this page, had said it was like a little girl playing with her dolls. So that's what I made this out to be too. I love that idea. So here's the little dolls. This is the misshapen cutlery. Here's the broom that Alice brought and the room that they were going to be working in. And then here is the dark figure that was going down the hallway away from them, away from her. And then I have the strangeness of the incident here. And then, oh, I guess it's upside down. I don't know what happened. And then here's the dining table. Oh, there's more to it, so that the dining table will come into play here in just a second. I wasn't done reading. So it was only on the third day that she knew she had to talk with Rose, since just after lunch, as she was collecting the dishes, which had strangely been turned upside down on the dining table, there it is, she again saw the man dressed as a reverend, now standing in the garden just a few feet beyond the window, staring directly at her with an expression of dreadful sadness across his pallid face. Rose sat with her for almost an hour, trying to reassure her that it was probably just someone paying a trick on her, one of the local youths perhaps, with nothing better to do than intimidate the new residents. They had probably sneaked inside, Rose explained, leaving the moldy plates upstairs before making their getaway. She would talk to Jeffrey about checking all the locks, she promised, and would ask if anyone knew who could have been responsible for such trickeries the next time she went into the village, which lay just over a mile away. Alice finally agreed that she would stay, but only after Rose had vowed she would not have to go into the East Wing again. Later that evening, after Alice had retired to her room at the other side of the house, Rose quietly told Geoffrey what had been happening. A kind and compassionate man, he liked Alice and was happy that she would be staying, adding that Rose was right and that he would be sure to check the locks, lay a tocsin in the cellar, and ask at the factory to see whether anyone knew who might have been responsible for such immature activities. Satisfied it would be an end to the matter, Rose went to bed earlier than her husband, since she was fatigued from the cough that still blighted her, leaving him to concentrate on some paperwork in the study at the center of the building. The couple had chosen to make one of the better downstairs rooms into their temporary bedroom until they had completed the work in the house, and, situated close to the kitchen as it was, Geoffrey often joked how he would miss such convenience for the midnight snack when they did eventually relocate. At around a quarter to midnight, Rose was disturbed by muffled sounds coming from the direction of the study, and concerned that Geoffrey was still working at such a late hour, she drowsily got out of bed to find him and urge him to join her. The soft sounds, resembling someone shuffling along a wooden floor, continued as she approached the study, but when she reached the doorway, she realized the room was completely empty. The sound stopped. There was no sign of anyone. And when she returned to the bedroom, she realized that Geoffrey was lying in bed sound asleep. Now, this right here is the page where she's hearing the shuffling. And I thought that if you see, you have a couple here in this mirror, a couple of ghosts. You see another set of twins and a and a couple on the wall behind them there. And so this was the study where, Geoffrey had been. You can see some of the old family photos, the bookshelf. And then there was another bookshelf that sat over in the corner, as you can see. Well, behind it was this set of twins. And everybody calls them the Bat Girls or the Bat Belt Girls. So there you go. You have them there. And then here is the saying: at around a quarter to midnight, Rose was disturbed by muffled sounds coming from the study. So the girls were in here playing around and made these noises. Now, their parents as well were servants in the house when the Milsons were here. You also have this, another identification card stub, and a slide. And I've got a type slide here. And what it is he was studying some of these old men that were at the house working on the grounds and stuff like that. So what it is, this was him as a baby, this is him as a young man, and then that was him as an older man. And he was one of the gardeners, I believe, is how I had him. So this was another one of the investigator's studies in the area. All right, now that was, what was that, 14? Yes, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to have it turned around that way. That was number 14, and then day 15 is here. Several days passed, and although the weather was beginning to turn, and the house never seemed to warm regardless of how often they stoked the several fireplaces, nothing of any note occurred. That was until one Friday afternoon, when Rose was busy in the east wing once again, folding and packing the few curtains that remained hanging at the smeared windows, and wearing a scarf across her face to protect her from the dust. She noticed a small girl standing in the garden, looking over a low wall and appearing to shimmer in the pale autumnal sunlight. At the very same moment, she heard a terrible crash from somewhere downstairs, and immediately concerned for Alice, she rushed away to discover what had happened. There she found her young cousin on her hands and knees scrubbing the kitchen floor, just as she had left her some time earlier. Alice had heard and seen nothing, and so, confused but no longer troubled, Rose returned to her curtains. Upon entering the room, again she stopped and gasped as she saw that all the curtains she had previously taken down were now returned to their rails, hanging as though they had never been touched. All right, so this is the room that has the several fireplaces, and then you have where she looked out and she saw this little girl. This is like the, what do you call it? Like the, where you would have flowers and things inside of a house. I can't remember what you call that now. But here is the little girl. Now here she looks like, a human alive. But then here she doesn't. She looks like you can see through her. And I put a little magnet on here so it would slide off and slide on again. And then you're able to write on the back page. Greenhouse? Is that what I'm trying to think of? A greenhouse? Maybe so. All right. So over here is where she had the curtains. This is where she was taking the curtains down. And then you flip the page and there's the curtains up again. And this is just a little piece of paper you can write on that's tucked in behind the curtains. And then shaken, Rose went back downstairs and sat alone in the study until Jeffrey's return from the factory, wondering if she had somehow gone into a different room by mistake, that she had become lost while walking along the corridor. Although this seemed to her a very unlikely conclusion, she grudgingly accepted that it was the only one that made any sense. 2 days later, she was left alone in the house, as Alice had gone into the village to run some errands for the family. By now, she had completed the packing of the curtains without further disruption, and was occupied with sorting through the one item of furniture that remained in the east wing. It was an old solid oak bureau with a bottom drawer she was unable to open, but additional drawers and compartments stuffed with papers and other miscellany. She found letters and postcards, small ornaments, and mementos that she assumed belonged to whoever had lived there previously. Reading through some of the cards, she suddenly began to hear the peaceful sounds of a piano playing. the music drifting up the stairs and into the empty room. She turned to look over her shoulder with surprise. Even as if Alice had returned earlier than expected, Rose neither knew she was able to play the piano, nor was aware that the old broken upright that stood downstairs was capable of emitting a single note. So here's the piano and a bunch of the papers that she's been finding over here in this old bureau. And there's another stack with a skull. And I just made a pocket out of this music paper. And you can see some more of the pages here. And then here's like an old key that went to the bureau, though one of the drawers was stuck, you know. Okay. Then, as the music faded, she discerned very small knocking sounds as though something might be trapped somewhere inside the bureau. Unable to find anything, it occurred to her that maybe it was caught behind it, although she could not imagine what could have been confined in so small a space. Using all her strength, she was able to shift the heavy piece of furniture away from the wall, but rather than freeing whatever had been trapped, she instead saw that a section of wallpaper had been ripped away and something had been written on the plaster. As the knocking grew louder, Rose leaned towards the wall, reading the almost illegibly scrawled words, "Rose, get away, can thee wile." I don't know if that was supposed to be "while thee can," or that was just the way that this was written. But all you see here is the getaway. And I made this into a pocket to slide this file folder in. And this was actually evidence, physical evidence that was, collected and seen. So that's why I have that on here. And it was registered. So that was where I was supposed to be writing in there. And I haven't done that. Bad me. Okay. So then, falling back, shocked at what she had found, oh, where did I? Okay. At what she had found, she shuddered as a stone suddenly dropped to the floor beside her. Then another fell, then another, as though the first drops of a rain shower. Another quickly followed, then dozens hit the wooden floor with great speed at almost the same time, bouncing across the room only to be replaced by yet more. Terrified, Rose covered her head with her hands and ran from the room, narrowly avoiding being hit by any of the missiles. And I think at one point I had some little stones down here, but I didn't like them, so I took them off. So anyhow, oh, let me fold this back in. That goes like that. And I had each of my pages numbered over here, 16, 17, 18. So when Jeffrey came home a couple of hours later, she rushed to him, trying to explain what had happened, mixing her words and rushing through the story with such haste that he had to lead her to a nearby settee and implore her to breathe, to take a moment, and then start from the beginning. She told him again, this time with more coherence, and he listened attentively, without interruption. She also told him about Alice's experiences, wondering what could be happening, how there could be writing behind the bureau, how dozens of stone could have fallen to the floor without causing any damage to either the windows or the ceiling. Coughing fiercely, with a headache that was quickly developing into a migraine, Geoffrey prepared for her a tonic of ergo-alkaloids, soaked her sore eyes with cotton swabs, and then saw her to bed, doing his best to assure her that he would get to the bottom of it all and that she needn't worry. All right, so this is where he went into to get the cotton swabs and the alkaloid to soak her eyes and everything. And then this was where the stones were falling. I think this was the only other one that I could find. It was more like dust. And that was where you could write on the back of that. And then he was putting her to bed. Oh, here's a little patch of stones. I thought I had put someone here somewhere. In fact, As his diaries would later reveal, remember me talking about the diary back here? Yes, as in fact, as his diaries would later reveal, Jeffrey was quite deeply concerned for both Rose and Alice. He wondered if their exposure to the chemicals at the factory and their subsequent physical difficulties was having some effect upon them, although he could not be certain what effect that could be. Maybe their eyesight had somehow become corrupted, perhaps due to all the dust and flaking paint in the east wing. He also entertained, with a creeping sense of apprehension, the idea that perhaps there was some kind of inherent family condition, a strain of mental instability of which he had hitherto been unaware. He had never known Rose to exhibit any symptoms of psychological asininity, and started to grow anxious that he might lose her, that she might slip away from him. Over the following several days, he stayed at home, taking care of both Rose and Alice, not allowing them to do anything other than rest and relax. He prepared for them a regimen of very mild sedatives on the advice of a local doctor he had arranged to meet with, the knowledge of the two women, just so they would be able to sleep through the night and suffer less stress during the day. He felt distaste at doing such things since it went against his nature, but he could think of no other way to help them through the difficult time. Okay, at night, as the women slept, Jeffrey undertook brief investigative tours of the house, examining the rooms for any signs of broken windows or shattered locks, and even looking around the garden in case local ne'er-do-wells were lurking, but found nothing. The house was cold and quiet, but it seemed to him at peace, which only made him fear further for the welfare of his wife and her cousin. Then, after another few days had passed, much at Geoffrey's relief, both women reported that they were much better, that they didn't know what had come over them, and were now feeling much more like their usual selves. Surprised by this change, and persuaded that they had indeed recovered from whatever had ailed them and caused them such distress, Geoffrey returned to work at the factory at the beginning of October. Okay, everybody, I hope you liked that. This is part one. My voice is starting to go. My throat's dry. So I'm going to stop here, and there'll be a part two, and you'll be able to hear the rest of it. I'm getting ready to start Signature 3, so I figured I'll just stop there. And I'm going into another day, so that's a good place to put a hold on it, and we'll get back to it on the next video. I want to thank all my subscribers and viewers for coming by to visit, and I hope you enjoyed your reading. And if you if you like stuff like this, let me know. I would love to find a way to read through uh something I've crafted. Uh so yeah, I'm wondering how I could do that. So I may look into that a little bit more. Although you do like my stories, so I may just stick with telling my family stories a good bit of the time as well. All right, everybody, have a great day, great health, great happiness, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.